And I'm really grateful to all the people out there who are propagating plants and letting us dig plants out of their gardens so that we can put those in all the different public spaces that we are gardening in. It's an awful lot of fun. So if your garden is full and you need someplace else to plant, do check out our meetup because we are out planting plants in public spaces. It's a lot of fun. So today we're going to talk about color year-round gardening in San Francisco. And I do want to caution you. I had a lot of fun pulling this together, but some of these plants are readily available and some of them are not. And so I will probably not go into, oh, this one's hard to find, just on the off chance that you are able to find it. But there's an awful lot of pretty plants here. So let's take a look. We're going to talk about what are native plants, actions you can take, and then we're going to go season by season because it's important that we plant year-round. We've got year-round hummingbirds that would like to have a meal every day, and we've got early arriving queen bumblebees. They can show up as early as November around Thanksgiving. And so it's important that we have something blooming so that we can feed them. And then when things really start popping in spring, when we get a lot more of the insects showing up so that we have a lot of things blooming. So we'll talk about winter color, spring color, summer and fall color. We'll talk about colorful foliage, bark, and berries, because that's an interesting way to bring texture and depth into a garden. We'll talk about colorful containers because if what you've got is a north-facing balcony with containers on it, we still have colorful plants for you. And then we'll talk about year-round buffets for people and wildlife, and then native garden resources where you can find information. So why would we plant native plants? Native plants evolved here. They evolved here in our 6 kinds of soil in 7 by 7 miles. They evolved in our 3 north and south running fog and wind banks, and they evolved with our variable rainfall. So San Francisco has historically had as much as 50 inches of rain and as little as 7 inches of rain. So the 32 inches of rain we had 2 years ago and the 25 inches of rain we had last year, that's our plants are evolved to manage that. They would like help through the first year, most of them. And if they're an oak woodland understory plant, they might want a couple of years of water. But if you can just keep the weeds away from them, they will find each other underground and it will help them a great deal. Our 20 inches might be our average rainfall, but it really does vary. And plants evolved together. They evolved in plant communities. There's as much going on underground as there is above ground. And so it's important that we, when we can, to add them together in plant communities. It's astonishing to me how well that helps them all get along. And we've got so many different plant communities. There's a wonderful project from San Francisco Estuary Institute called Hidden Nature that's available online. I talk about 11 different plant communities, but they get a lot more detailed in terms of what the plant communities are. Oak woodlands, dune scrub, dunes, grasslands, and the creekside plant communities. Their fancy word is riparian. There's also salt marshes. There's a lot. And it's important to know that all of our insects, and then all of our birds, and all of our mammals, all of our wildlife co-evolved with those plants. That's where they get their food. And the insects specifically are the ones that take that energy from the plant leaf or pollen, and then they feed other insects, they feed mammals, they feed birds, they feed the rest of the ecosystem. So we need to feed those specialist insects that evolved with leaves, that have a life cycle that eats leaves and a very few leaves and our local leaves, so that we can have a nice resilient ecosystem, both to handle the variation in weather that we get. I'd say normally, but just we normally have variation in weather as well as what we will experience with climate change. There's a lot of other great places to get information on plant communities. In addition to Hidden Nature, there's also Las Politas and SF Plant Finder. We've got 1,300 butterfly and moth caterpillar species that evolved in California, 35 butterflies just in San Francisco. And they all eat the native plant leaves that they co-evolved with. So it's really important that we plant these when we can, where we have the space. If you have a tiny backyard, I completely understand that you wouldn't plant a 70-foot by 70-foot coast live oak. But if you have a larger space, or when you have a larger space, to consider having those larger keystone plants. And those top 3 plants are considered our keystone species. The willows, which are the riparian keystone species, the coast live oak, which is our oak woodland keystone species, and our hollyleaf cherry, which is the keystone species for the dune scrub, to put those into our landscape when we have the space. And when we don't, if you've just got a smaller space, that pink flowering currant, that is much smaller. That is not a tree. That's 13 feet. California lilac, our local one, is 12 feet tall. These are all species that feed over 100 different caterpillars with their leaves. And so it's important that we have this. If you are interested in knowing more about which caterpillars feed which species and which species feed which caterpillars, there is CalScape has got that for all of our native caterpillars and butterflies and moths, and National Wildlife Federation has got it for both the introduced and the native species. So if you were looking to talk to one of your friends or family members in another state, the National Wildlife Federation Native Plant Finder is very useful. It turns out that butterflies and moths are not our only specialist insect species that we specifically need to plant for. We also have something called pollen specialist bees. There are 1,500 native bees in California. The honeybee is not native. It comes from Europe and Asia. Of those 1,500 native bees, over 600 of them are called pollen specialist bees, and they have special pollen required to feed the baby bees. So the adult bees can get nectar and pollen from any flower, but the baby bees need special pollen in their little lunch boxes that their moms and their aunties make for them. So it turns out there's about 68 native plant genera, so it's one level up from species, that can feed these over 600 different specialist bees. And we've got 6,000 California native plants. And so this is just an idea of which ones of those plants are important in case you needed an excuse to get a different plant than the butterfly and caterpillar list. Introduced plant pollen can feed one specialist baby bee species, our squash bee that is native all across the US and into Canada, can eat squash pollen from any squash, from actually all the way down to through Mexico. So yay, one specialist baby bee species. We want to plant for more than that. And just in case you needed more excuses to buy more plants, feed more bees, we've got, of those 600 pollen specialist bees, there's 231 solo pollen specialist bees. There's a special word called oleolecti or something. Anyway, I don't know where they come up with these words, but those are the ones that only go to one genera of plant. So there's, for instance, 36 specialist bees that eat the pollen or have the pollen for their babies from beech sun cups. But of those, 30 of them only use beech sun cups. 21 of them only use willows. 16 of them only use buckwheats. And I included a bunch of the very colorful, by the way, bulbs and annuals that we have just because there's a bunch of bees that depend on us planting annuals. So very interesting and very fun. Lots and lots and lots of excuses. So yeah, introduce plant pollen. It doesn't feed any of the solo specialist baby bees. So yay, more food for baby bees when we plant these species. So let's talk about actions we can all take. So urban native plants can feed wildlife. A lot of places like to say that, oh, urban areas, you can't have any wildlife there. Well, of course we can. 68% of San Francisco is paved. Every plant is an opportunity to feed our ecosystem. So just in case you were unaware that I am a fangirl of San Francisco Estuary Institute, they did yet another project called Making Nature City. And this toolkit is available for free on the internet. And they've talked about what is the most important things. We put in the native plants, that we have green corridor stepping stones, as CNPS Yerba Buena is building along Sunset Boulevard, and the quality of the green space. No invasive plants, that we reduce those introduced plants, that we reduce lawn and we avoid pesticides. And to have those green patch sizes, because we do have wildlife that really need larger patches of green space to live in, such as the California quail, and to take very special care when we do have access to water aquifers and large trees to take good care of those, because those are so important to our wildlife. And so this means that your container on a north-facing balcony can help create that ongoing buffet that we want to make for wildlife. And so we're building wildlife corridors. And so all of these green dots are native plants, some of our 500 remaining native plants out of our original 700 native plant species that we had. We still have 500 of them. And so these green dots show us where they are. Some of them look like they're off in the ocean. That's because some of them, some people don't have exact coordinates turned on. And those red dots, those are 29 of our 35 butterfly species. So we can see how building those corridors can bring back those butterflies. When we look closer, because if we look at this, we're like, oh, we're done, game over, go have dessert. No, we have to look closer, and we see that there's just still so many spaces where we need to add native plants. That green space here, I don't know if you can see my arrow, is Sunset Boulevard, where we and Nature in the City are working on adding native plants back so that we can create that green corridor between Golden Gate Park and Lake Merced. But it also captures the native plants that are being stewarded by the Natural Resources Division of San Francisco Rec and Park, and that California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena helps. We help them weed, and we've helped them weed for decades in those areas. And you can find out where our next weeding opportunity is on our meetup. You can also get a hold of this project. It's just a publicly available project. It's on iNaturalist. Actions that you can take. You can plant native plants. You can build these native plant corridors for wildlife. You can join your neighborhood groups to plant native plants. You don't just have to plant with Yerba Buena. There's Nature in the City. There's Sutro Stewards. There's all kinds of good groups out there that are planting native plants. If you are interested in designing native green spaces, it turns out a lot of green spaces are looking for free design help. A lot of people just have gardens too small, or we have green spaces that some of our groups don't have landscape designers to design, so we could really use help with that. And help us advocate with city and the county and schools to plant native plants. Remove invasive plants, and when you do, as soon as the rainy season starts, which is just a couple weeks, replace those invasive plants with native plants. Propagate native plants. We've got at least 9 people who are propagating native plants in their backyard. Then we're able to take those native plants and plant those in those green spaces that we're all working to revegetate. Save native plant seeds, share native plant seeds, create plant lists, collect rainwater for irrigation. If you've got your own garden, please collect rainwater. We've been very lucky the last 2 years, but that luck does not hold. And collecting rainwater is just a wonderful way of making sure you'll be able to have the water available to help those baby plants make it through their first year. Hike and lead hikes in our green spaces. We're looking for a field trip lead here at California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena. So come hike with us. These are free hikes. Contribute citizen science data. So iNaturalist is citizen science data. eBird is citizen science data. There's a lot of different ways to get involved with that. It shows people that you're interested in. You show scientists where we've got the wildlife and where we've got the plants. Map butterfly corridors, illustrate brochures, become a naturalist, make videos, tell stories, and dance with butterflies. Caterpillars feed our ecosystems, and introduced plants just don't. So if a plant doesn't feed anybody, I'm really not interested in seeing it in my landscape anymore. Native plants feed colorful wildlife. So it's not just the plants that are colorful. Look at all this colorful wildlife. We don't have any fireflies west of the Rocky Mountains, but we do have this fabulous beetle that is glow in the dark, and it only lives in pristine dunes. So we only have it at the Presidio. So more opportunities for dune restoration. So there's so much color and so much movement that can happen once you plant colorful native plants in your garden. So let's talk about those plants. They come in all kinds of colors, both the plants and the wildlife. So here's a guide to what we're about to talk about. This little thing on the upper left talks about the number of butterfly and moth caterpillar species that are fed by the plant leaves. And the little thing on the right with the bee shows the number of baby specialist bee species that are fed by plant pollen. There may be some plants that need some water because they're colorful. You might have a space. I know that part of my garden seems to be right over a creek. So I have one corner that's constantly got water. And so you would be able to put a plant that needed a lot more water in there if you do have a lawn, someplace that would be able to withstand that amount of water. There are a ridiculous number of plants that are long blooming. My definition is 3 months or longer. And so keep an eye open for the long blooming plants. I am really impressed by the number of colorful plants that are blooming for a very long time. So we're going to talk winter color, spring color, summer and fall color, colorful foliage, bark, and berries, colorful containers, and year-round colorful buffets. Winter color. So pink flowering currant, what a great plant. It's gorgeous, long blooming. It's very important to those hummingbirds that want to overwinter. Same thing with manzanita. It's just, manzanita is very drought tolerant. Our native ones are also adapted to our more rocky soils. Depending on which manzanita you get, the flower color can change, but that's a really nice evergreen plant. So I will not usually talk about soil. Please go to Calscape to learn more about soil, sun, and water needs for most of these plants. But basically, if something has the name sand in the name, it almost certainly needs sandy soil. So pink sand verbena, it needs sandy soil. Seaside daisy, it will withstand clay, but it would really prefer sand. I've seen it in both, and yeah, it's a great long blooming plant. It would prefer sand. Rock cress needs sand. Malvarosa is gorgeous. It can take a lot of different soils, bulletproof in terms of the amount of shade it can take. It's a great plant and blooms for a long time and blooms early. For our yellow plants, we've got barberry. So really interesting, long blooming, winter blooming. Again, it really intended to be pollinated by overwintering hummingbirds and early arriving queen bumblebees, but the barberries also got edible berries. So delicious. We've got gorgeous beach primrose. We've got the yellow sand verbena. We've got sun cups. We've got pincushion. So some beautiful long blooming plants, because all of these plants want to get as much of that early pollinator action as possible. Let's talk spring. So most of California native plants in our area bloom in the spring, because if you're blooming in the winter, like these previous plants did. You only have gotten about half your rain, and you're not really sure how much to allocate between your roots and flowers and leaves. In spring, you know about how much water you got, and so you know how to do that allocation. I've definitely seen in the years with a lot more drought, I get many fewer flowers. Blue. We have got so many gorgeous blue plants. Our local California lilac, the Thrysophloris, is just gorgeous. Hound's tongue, gilia, blue-eyed grass is a little bit purpley, but still pretty blue. One of the phacelias, the Great Valley Phacelia, is more blue colored in the baby blue eyes, blue, and also feeds specialist bees, important specialist bees. So gorgeous opportunities to really get in there with the blue colors. And it's spring, so we have a lot of different choices. So the blues and the purples are separated. The purples, oh my gosh, the lupines. So our lupines are really important. That is a mission blue butterfly on the silver bush lupine, the Lupinus albifrons, and it's just gorgeous and very drought tolerant and absolutely has to have sand. So if you have sandy soil, you are lucky because you can grow that. And we go from something like the lupine to something that's an annual, like the fiesta flower, and the Chinese houses are annuals. Fiesta flower can take a lot of shade. It is an oak woodland understory plant, and when you get shorter than an oak, you can take a lot of shade. Hookspur violet, also very shade tolerant. It'll go summer deciduous too. So those are edible leaves and edible flowers for people. Owl's clover is an important, very pretty, very showy plant. Chinese houses, great annual. Phacelia, many of the phacelias are annuals. Phacelia californica is a very, very drought tolerant perennial. Blue dips are really cute. It's one of our local bulbs, and it's got this very pretty flower, and it is just a huge butterfly nectar provider. All of the butterflies seem to adore getting nectar from that. And then Douglas iris, if you or your friends are a little bit cautious about starting to plant native plants, most gardeners know what an iris is, and the Douglas iris looks like other iris. So it can take some shade, and it's very colorful, and it's low growing. And it's really pretty for those people who are just a little bit more cautious about, well, do I really want to start planting natives? Yes, just do it with the iris. It's a bulb. It's easy. So I did want to give a whole page to the lupines because we have so many lupins that are native here, and almost all of them are purple or blue. The sky lupin's gorgeous, the dune bush lupin's gorgeous, the many-color lupine's gorgeous, the arroyo lupin's gorgeous. The yellow bush lupine is also beautiful. It's the only one that isn't in the blue or purple phase. I do want to caution you, it can take clay or sandy soil, but it will be invasive in sand. So you can spend all of your years digging it out and giving it to us, and we'll put it somewhere else. Ideally someplace with clay soil where we have fewer lupins that can live there, but you might want to concentrate on the other ones. It's great for the environment, but it will get a little aggressive. And then all kinds of really pretty pinks. The onions are really great. Again, bulbs are easy. Try that. Onions are wonderful. They are entirely edible. Not only the bulbs, but the leaves and the flowers are edible and the seeds are edible. So super delicious and just very, very showy. Sea pink's really showy. Checker bloom is showy. The hedge nettle is remarkably showy. If you've got a damper, darker spot, it's perfect. Hummingbird sage, very showy. In the mint family, so entirely edible, the leaves and the flowers and the seeds. And the flowers taste like fruit punch. Just delicious. Pink honeysuckle, very, very pretty. Definitely needs good drainage. And shooting star is gorgeous. It needs some water and it can take some shade. So when you look at our red plants, most of them are sort of this interesting orangey red. But if you look at the top right, what you're seeing is one of our butterflies that co-evolved with these plants. So this is our red admiral butterfly, and that color is the same reddish orange color that we're seeing in a bunch of the other red plants that we see both in spring and in summer, because that butterfly tends to have additional children that can live and breed again during the summer. Big leaf maple is a wonderful tree. Not great with wind, but it is an important tree. And if you're looking for fall color, it's beautiful. Scarlet monkey flower is going to want some water. The columbine, the local one's going to want some water. If you're looking for a red plant that doesn't need a lot of water, bee plant is a very tough plant. If you're new to gardening, bee plant's a great place to start. And then all kinds of orange plants. So California poppies, you'll go, but I see those in the summer. You do see them in the summer, because if they get any water at all, they'll just keep blooming. And so that's a lot of fun. And so you will definitely see them in the summer, but they do start to bloom in the spring. Orange bush monkey flower is gorgeous. The coast fiddleneck is hard to find in nurseries and hard to grow in the garden, but it is one of our spring orange flowers. And if you're able to get that working, if you're able to find it and get it working, that would be really fun. And we've got all kinds of yellow flowers. The Harlequin lotus, I never know if I should put that in pink or in yellow. It's just gorgeous. I can't manage to find it. I want it. It only lives on sandy soil. It's just beautiful. Cinquefoil, mule ears, and golden aster. Golden aster is evergreen, and there's a variety of them, from some flat versions to taller versions. 78 specialist bees with that. And if you love the daisy shape, that's just a beautiful plant for you. And it's going to bloom all the way through the summer into the fall. So it's a very happy plant and very, very easy to grow. We've also got the San Francisco wallflower is white and scented. There is another wallflower, which according to the Mike Woods plant list is also still native here, is yellow. Gorgeous yellow Mariposa lily. It's so beautiful. If you cook the bulb, it's edible. And so that's my excuse for having bought it and put it in my garden. I am not digging that up and cooking it and eating it. I just want to see it bloom every year. It's beautiful. Yellow violet is another violet relative. You can eat the leaves and the flowers. It wants more water. So again, near a lawn or underneath a, fountain. California buttercup wants the ranunculus. So you may have heard of ranunculus in terms of being a garden plant from other places. Like we've got violets in Europe. There are ranunculus in Europe and Asia. It just so happens that our ranunculus wants some more water. Summer and fall colors. So these are important plants. So those long blooming plants are going to help feed adult insects through the summer and the fall. And so we've got some gorgeous purple plants. Our clover wants some more water, but it's beautiful. California aster is just gorgeous, and 34 specialist bees. Look at it with that really pretty green sweat bee on it. So pretty. Coyote mint is wonderful. Just edible leaves, edible flowers. It wants sand and full sun. It's really gorgeous. I keep trying to, I've got it on sand and too much, on clay in too much shade, and it hates life here. But the ones that I see that are on sand and in sun are really happy plants, and they're just covered with pollinators. Self-heal is a wonderful one. And then most of the Clarkias are pink, but part of the farewell to spring mix, the Clarkia unguiculata, comes in some really pretty warm purple colors. The rest of the Clarkias are pink. So many gorgeous pink Clarkias. We've got a couple of pink roses that are native. They're very thorny. We've got our thistle that's important for specialist bees. That's a bright, dark pink, and the California sand aster is summer blooming and long blooming. Again, these are the warmer reds because they're trying to help that red admiral stay hidden from all of the birds that want to eat it. We've got California poppies that are continuing to bloom. We've got monkey flower saber that can take some more sage, also wants some more water, also edible, extremely minty. The leopard lily is just gorgeous. It wants water. It's a bulb, so if you are going to water your container all summer, that's a good bulb to have. The other bulbs in San Francisco tend to want to have a dry summer. Leopard lily wants water all the time. Twinberry honeysuckle, beautiful red flowers that feed hummingbirds, and the California fuchsia. When you see those longer flowers, they're really not intended to be pollinated by any of the smaller insects. They're intended to be pollinated by hummingbirds or larger bees. Lots and lots and lots of summer yellow flowers. So great combinations with those purple flowers. The Grindalia, the gumweed, gorgeous, just such a tough plant. 84 specialist bees, Katie bush, such a tough plant. Woolly sunflower, such a tough plant. Tough means I haven't been able to kill it. Evening primrose, really tough. Goldenrod, really tough. These are great, tough plants for just sunny spaces where you may not be able to get around to watering them very much. Stonecrop is one of our 3 local succulents, and it's an important bee plant. And sorry, important caterpillar plant as well. We've also got a mock heather with 93 specialist bees and our serpentine sunflower with 100 specialist bees. And so some of these, the mock heather, the senecio, and the isocoma, the golden bush, are a little less showy. So planting those in mass with some of those purple flowers, like the California aster, it just really pops. So pretty. Madia is an annual, and deerweed is great. 59 specialist bees, and it is one of the caterpillar plants for the coastal green hair streak. If you're a new gardener or a new gardener in California, and or you just spend a lot of time out of town, or you've got other things that take a lot of your time, and you just don't have a lot of time to garden, these are a lot of tough plants. Put it in November. Water when you put it in. Water whenever you can remember. They will generally survive. We've got bee plants, Grindalia and California fuchsia. And then for our annuals, we've got the poppies and the tidy tips, and really all of the Clarkias are pretty tough. So for new gardeners, this is your page. We also have additional plants that are tough, but they're white. So for these are the colorful ones. Let's talk colorful foliage, bark, and berries. Fall foliage. Some of you really love that. So our big leaf maple has gorgeous fall foliage, and that has gorgeous fall foliage right now if you're here live in mid-October. California hazelnut. Mine hasn't started to change. Well, actually, one of them has. The other one hasn't. But they're just starting to have their fall color. Also, you need 2 for nuts. Delicious. They are WUCOL's medium, which is the water use classification of landscape species. It says they need a lot of water. They certainly grow faster with water, and they have more nuts with water, but they're pretty tough. And so I tend to buy 1 gallons and put them in, and they do great. Blue elderberry, boy, is that a tough tree. It will grow faster the more water you give it. Gorgeous fall color, and it's showing fall color now. And the more you water it, the more it'll grow. It will get to 30 feet pretty fast. That hazelnut is only going to be about 18 feet. The big leaf maple's about 30 feet in San Francisco. They are 100 feet up in Vancouver, but that's because they get more water. So if they got more water, they'd be taller, but they will produce maple syrup. It's a 40-to-1 compression for that. And they do have maple syrup contests up in Canada that I have been wanting to taste. But they will do it. They don't produce as much sugar as the sugar maples, and we also don't get cold enough for them to produce as much sugar. But in theory, at least, my big leaf maple could produce maple syrup for pancakes. And there's this great plant called the Dutchman's pipevine. It feeds one caterpillar with the leaves, and that is the pipevine swallowtail. So that is that gorgeous, just electric blue butterfly at the bottom that is getting nectar from a one-leaf onion plant. It's a messy plant. It can handle a lot of shade. In fact, it prefers a lot of shade, at least to start growing in shade. That picture of a pipevine is one of my Dutchman's pipevine on actually a pipevine on a vine maple tree. It's a little messy, but it's adorable when it's covered with caterpillars. And this is a butterfly that is locally rare because when all the trees got cut down, a lot of sun happened. And so the pipe vines just didn't make it through. So we are restoring pipe vines in San Francisco. That butterfly is absolutely gorgeous. It has a lot of energy. It'll fly pretty far. We just need to put a lot of pipe vines in so that the mama butterflies can find someplace to lay those eggs. So I strongly encourage you to put a pipe vine in if you're okay with a little bit of a more relaxed gardening look. And we have some beautiful gray foliage plants. You don't need to go anywhere else. We've got them. We've got all of our different sagebrushes have got different colors, different grays. They've got different textures. Most of them, the dune sagebrush really wants sand, but the California sagebrush can take sand or clay. And that there's a couple of prostrate versions of the sagebrush, the Canyon Gray and the Montara, that can take Canyon Gray can take sand and clay, and Montara can take a variety of different rocky soils. And you can just use that instead of a lawn. It's gorgeous. Coast buckwheat, gorgeous silvery plant, and it is the other caterpillar plant for the coastal greenhair streak. Beautiful plants with colored bark. Our manzanita's got gorgeous colored bark. The Pacific madrone has got gorgeous colored bark. The red twig dogwood does have gorgeous bark. It does want some water, and it just needs a ridiculous amount of maintenance. That's what it looks like when it grows. The good news is you can make arrows out of those nice, straight, beautiful red red twigs, but it's a cane grower. It needs to be cut back, and it's a ton of maintenance. It does have 3 specialist bees that all are solo specialist bees. If this seems like a fun plant for you, go for it. But yeah, you've had me warn you about maintenance. And then gorgeous, colorful berries. There's thimbleberry and salmonberry and our 2 native strawberries, and the hollyleaf cherry and the huckleberry and the blue elderberry and the toyon. So many beautiful, colorful berries. Toyon's not edible unless you cook it. And I hear that even when you cook it, it's not delicious. So don't bother, let the migrating birds eat them instead. All of the rest of these are all edible. So just delicious berries that you can have that just are delightful in the garden. So for those of you who have just container gardens, we have lots of plants for you. So we've got bulbs, and we've got annuals, and we've got succulents. The succulents are the stonecrop and the bluff lettuce. And the annuals are the tidy tips and the goldfields. And that yellow Mariposa lily is one of the bulbs. Just so pretty. I've met people who just collect all the different Mariposa lilies, and I can't blame them. They are beautiful. And 10 specialist bees. And just beautiful blue flowers between the Gilia bulbs, the annuals like the sky lupine and the baby blue eyes and the Phacelia, blue-eyed grass. That's one of the, it's in the iris family, interestingly. And they've got tiny little rhizomes, just adorable and great in containers, and they can take a lot of shade. Lots of gorgeous purple. We've got beautiful purple lupins and bulbs like the ethereal spear and the brodier and the blue dips and rhizomes like the iris, and then the Chinese houses and fiesta flower for the purple annuals. Just beautiful. And you could just put holes in a takeout container and grow all of these. And some gorgeous pink flowers, one-leaf onion, and the different clarkias. There is another, the Mariposa lily that is the Calochortus albus is for all that albus is saying that it ought to be white, it's really kind of pink. And then sea pink, which is so pretty, and it does really well in containers. Red maids is a lot of fun. It does want well-draining soil or soil mix in a container, but those leaves are edible, and someday I am looking forward to tasting it. These are your Clarkia choices. So many beautiful Clarkias. So the the left two pink ones are always pink, and then the right four are the different kinds of colors that show up in the Clarkia unguiculata mix. So we want to feed everyone all year long. So we're going to talk edible native plants for people and for adult butterflies and for bees and for hummingbirds. So we're talking about native plant buffets. They're always feeding our caterpillars. Caterpillars are feeding our ecosystem, and the rest of us need to eat too. So these are edible plants for people, and the kinds of times of years you'd be able to find those plants. So the far left, in January, you're really going to be able to find more of the edible greens. So that hummingbird sage, for instance, isn't going to be blooming in January, but the leaves will be available. Yerba Buena is delicious. Miner's lettuce is going to start being available in January or February. It needs about 8 inches of rainfall. Red maids are going to be available, and then in the spring we'll start to see some of those berries. The strawberry, the thimbleberry, onions are going to start to bloom. The chia, rhodiola, the blue elderberry, the barberry, yampa, which is delicious and it tastes kind of like licorice, which is not a huge surprise because it's one of the caterpillar plants for the anise swallowtail. Poppy seeds are edible, but they will set off a drug test. So make sure you give yourself a couple weeks if you're going to make poppy seed muffins out of your poppies. If you are going to take a drug test, understand that it'll set it off. Monkey flower savory is one of those greens that's available year round. The coyote mint, the greens are available all year round. The plant is blooming in the spring, but the greens, it's evergreen and beautiful. Salmonberry, hazelnuts, they were producing back in August, and it's sort of this incredible buffet of thimbleberry and then salmonberry and then hazelnuts and then huckleberries and currants and cherries. The hollyleaf cherry should be blooming, should be fruiting any minute now. I'm noticing I've got one hollyleaf cherry that's older in a very shady spot, and it seems to fruit later than some of the ones that get more sun. Adult butterflies, most of the time they're really looking for something flat where they can show off their color in terms of like a little bit of a contrasting way, also a little bit flatter so that they can just really spread out and get some nectar. And also those flatter flowers are also more available for the tinier insects. And so that's a lot of fun for the birds that would like to eat those tiny insects. So just a beautiful year-round buffet of plants. So really do keep in mind that manzanitas and seaside daisies are those great early blooming plants. We didn't talk about yarrow very much because it's white, but it is a long blooming plant. Golden aster, gumweed, those are later blooming, and they're blooming now. Goldenrod's blooming now, coyote bush is blooming now. So great plants to have in the garden. And so we not only are planting for adult butterflies, but we're also planting for bees. And so a lot of the bees can have some of their own preferences. They love manzanitas. They love the lupins. goldenrod, golden aster, sunflowers, grindalia, California aster, the currants. They're just, it's fun to plant that buffet and see who shows up. And hummingbirds are very specific. They would rather not argue with a tiny insect. They would rather be able to go in, have their lunch, and then go out and have another lunch. And that's one of the fun reasons to plant iris is that you can get, it's one of the plants that's attracting hummingbirds, and it can take some shade. The pink flowering currant can take some shade. We've got 4 or 5 different currants that are native to San Francisco, and the pink flowering currant is the one that can take some shade. And that Malva rosa can take some shade. So those are fun things to keep in mind. Hummingbird sage can take some shade. The rest of the California sages all need full sun. So where can you find out more about this? So we're going to talk Doug Tallamy, the CalScape plant selection tool, and where you can find those plants, CalFlora, and some native plant lists. Doug Tallamy is the guy that he and his grad students went and counted how many caterpillars were needed to fledge one nest of baby bees, and it was 6,000 to, not bees, sorry, birds, 6,000 caterpillars to fledge one nest of baby birds. So it's really important that we plant caterpillars so that we can have a healthy ecosystem. Doug Tallamy is going to be speaking in person Saturday, November 16th and Saturday, November 17th as part of the Bringing Back the Natives tour. One talk is in Oakland and the other one is in Santa Clara. He wrote a book called Nature's Best Hope, and he's got a homegrown national park initiative, and all of his information is available on the National Wildlife Federation website. He was paid back in 2015 and 2016 to pull all this information together at the county level in terms of all the data that had already been collected, but honestly was behind paywalls. So that at the county level, USDA paid for this, we would all be able to see what caterpillars were able to use which plants. And so it's a very useful tool. I personally use CalScape because they've got all that information for the California native plants. So Doug Tallamy's recommended best practices are to plant those native keystone plants, the oaks, willows, and cherries, plant a variety of local native plants, plant for those specialist pollinators and caterpillars, those pollen specialist bees. Coordinate with your neighbors, avoid spraying any kind of insecticide or herbicide, and build a conservation hardscape. Use yellow LED light bulbs, and if you're going to install a fountain, consider installing a water bubbler. Got a friend in Virginia who's got 3 water bubblers that she's got a heater on, so she has birds there year round. Advocate for native plants, remove your lawn, and remove invasive species. CNPS has got a plant selection tool called CalScape. The new CalScape has rolled out. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's great about talking about soil and sun and caterpillars and pollinators and how big that plant's going to be, and importantly, where you can find it, which nurseries. Keep in mind that they're specific about the soil needed for a plant, but if you get a recommended plant list, keep in mind that there's still a 10-mile radius on CalScape recommendations, and so you want to know what your soil is and keep that in mind when you are evaluating their recommendations. But it's gorgeous, and they are currently asking for input on a survey. So if you go to the CalScape website, you'll get a chance to give them more information about how you use the tool and how it could be even better for you. CalFlora is another way to find the geographic range of plants as well as the bloom period. So I got all of my bloom periods off of CalFlora. They're a little bit more detailed, or at least they were than CalScape was back when I did my original analysis. So CalFlora is another really great tool, and you can see how far south something grows and how far east it grows. And so you can understand whether or not you might have this plant alive for decades, or if it's just going to need a lot more help. So the plant that we're looking at on the left is the pink flowering currant that looks like it's all the way down nearly to Mexico. And the plant on the right is this hazelnut that I absolutely adore, but we're about the southern tip of it. And so it is going to need more help during climate change. And it's definitely going to need more help during the droughty years. So just keep that in mind when you are choosing plants for your garden and for public spaces. We've put a lot of plant lists together and a bunch of them are illustrated. We've got a colorful list: shade, long blooming, caterpillars, edible plants, bees, hummingbirds, birds, sidewalks, containers, bioswales, drought tolerant, plant communities, and landscape design. Do let us know if there is anything you're missing. I have an informal list on Scented that I've met 2 or 3 people that are interested in, but not enough to actually finish pulling it together. So do let me know. We are the California Native Plant Society. We have free lectures, free hikes. We do restoration. We do advocacy. And it's wonderful that you are here tonight. We've got a great community that we can interact with at all of these opportunities and here on our speaker series. And thank you so much for planting native plants. Together, we are a force of nature. Let's take some questions.
Hey, wow. True to its name, that was the most colorful native plant presentation I've ever seen. That was a lot of color, and that black background makes the images really pop. Nicely done, Susan.
Thank you.
We've been busily plugging in Noreen mostly on your link. So I think if you're using a PC, you can go to the chat, and there's little 3 dots there, and it should be able to let you actually copy those links over so that you can paste them for use later on. Otherwise, you got to like open all those windows. There must be 100 of them.
We do have a comment about the cartoon. I love the cartoon too. I saw it at a Xerxes Society meeting and went, oh, I have to go track that down and use it in every presentation.
That's funny.
Nice.
What kind of questions do we have?
Anybody out there? I do. Where'd you get all those fantastic photos? Get those off Cal Flora and Cal State?
iNaturalist. For some reason, when I coo at bees and butterflies, they don't seem to find that appealing. So
they don't like pinpointed at. Not many things do.
Yeah, so I really appreciate everyone iNaturalist who has taken pictures of butterflies and bees and specialist bees. Even the caterpillars just get insulted. Caterpillars are like teenagers. They want to eat, sleep, and poop, and they do not want me standing next to them cooing over how cute they are.
There's a question in the Q&A. Paula is asking if all the plants you showed are SF natives, not just California natives.
Yes, I think the one that is not is the chia. I meant to take all the non-SF natives out, but all of the rest of them are SF natives. There's a wonderful reference on, there's a guy named Mike Woods, one of the many volunteers that we have, who has consolidated all of the different botany surveys from the last couple 100 years into one Vascular Plants of San Francisco tool. It's available for free on the website, and we also,
yeah, it's on the biodiversity resources page that we linked.
Yeah.
Your camera is not resolving it, but
not resolving. I'm sorry about that.
Or maybe that's my eyes. I don't know.
No, it's really not resolving. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and there's some of them that are just not clearly known. Like I know people, the epilobe or the California fuchsia.
Oh,
You know,
you really think that's
people would
not
say,
local?
"Oh, I'm not so sure. We're not so sure about that one," but
Huh.
it's you know, I think we just don't know on some of them. But the ones that we do know we know about 509 that are absolutely native, and there's about I think he lists about 20 of them that we're not totally sure because I mean people started bringing plants over here, especially probably the flowered plants, you know, back in the 1800s, I imagine.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
could
there's
probably go over to Marin and find something and bring it over here.
yeah.
There was moving around going on even back then.
Yeah, there's a actually a problem getting California walnuts that are true because it's wind pollinated and they brought a lot of other walnuts over.
Mm.
So it's
I do have another question,
mhm.
and that's how do you figure out which plants
Like
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 to
to
live
live
here
in
in
communities.
communities? And this is by Chana.
Yeah, so that was one of the things it's endlessly fascinating to me. There's a combination of interesting information from Las Politas has got good information, SF Plant Finder has got good information. They're not always perfect about what is native to San Francisco specifically. They sometimes have some of the northern oak woodland, for instance, which is what we're part of. Our oak woodland is northern oak woodland. There's also a central oak woodland across the bay. There's Southern California oak woodland. And so all of those have got different plant communities associated with them. And so I take a look at Las Politas and SF Plant Finder and then reduce from there in terms of removing all the plants that aren't actually local here. Um, Same with the grasslands, the riparian, the dunes, and the dune scrub. That's kind of how I've done it. We have those lists on our website, the ones that a bunch of us have done this, not just me, but Libby Ingalls did the original ones. Because to me, that's what I want to do is I want to plant those things together. I've got someone who's planting at a school who put a pink flowering currant and some hummingbird sage and some yerba buena together. And I was like, that's perfect. Those are all understory oak woodland plants. They need the same amount of water. They can tolerate the same amount of shade, and they're just really great together.
And you know, as far as that goes about which plants like to live where, the one thing about San Francisco is it's very inviting for plants, and that's sort of like unfortunately so to some degree because since it doesn't freeze here, we have we actually have more non-native plants living here than we have native plants now. There's like I think 862 I think known non-native plants, and so it's pretty easy to grow here. But you know, it depends on what it has a lot to do with the soil type. Um, and you know, most of our backyards have had a lot of soil added to it, so that can be kind of tricky. A lot of people over in the east side have, you know, been taking a lot of their topsoil out to get back down to the Pleistocenic sand and planting these beautiful dune scrub plants. But one thing that we often recommend is that people look for a natural area near where they live and go and look there and try and figure out what plants you can use iNaturalist and such, and or Mike Wood's book, and look and see where, you know, what plants grow well in your neighborhood. And there's 1,100 acres of and divided into 32 or 30, maybe it's 34 areas in San Francisco that are managed by the Natural Resources Division. And so, you know, we had a big trouble, a lot of trouble with that when we went to plant to rewild an area on this Caltrans slope near our house, because there's very few records about Potrero Hill, for example. You know, because it's always grazed over early. But we came up with like 60 species, and we put them in an experimental patch. They all worked. You know, it's like almost nothing didn't work. So it's, you know, even if, you know, the plants aren't typically right from your soil type or habitat type, it's probably, you know, most of them will grow. But one of the things that we, you know, suggest to folks is like you can kind of amplify if you've got a natural area where there's some native ecology close by, you can sort of like borrow off of that, and that the butterflies don't have that far to go that way, you know, and you can have probably a best success of attracting butterflies and interesting insects and birds if you've got some similar plant habitat close by.
And Chana asks again, she said it's very helpful, but she's wondering how, or he is wondering about how botanists get the evidence for the communities. And I think that part of that is the soil, the weather, as well as, you know, the plant types that evolved in that area. So if it is like a grassland versus a tree, you know, a riparian area, you know, that creates the community that those plants exist within, and, you know, depend upon the other features to survive.
Right, and depending on how much fog you get, like we live on the east side of San Francisco, we get very little fog. And usually we're happy about that. But when we go out into these places that get a lot more fog, and we look at their beautiful, how many more flowering plants they have in late summer, we're like, oh, our area looks so dry. So it, you know, fog can add a lot, you know, and there's a lot of factors. Another presentation that Susan has given for us is shade gardening, and it's on our YouTube, and it is our most popularly viewed YouTube video ever. It's like got some crazy amount of looks. And my theory is that there's just so much shade because of the buildings and fences in San Francisco that a lot of people are, you know, having to adjust their gardens because of that shade. So it really does depend a lot on your circumstance, and we've nativized our garden about 20 years ago, and some things have just done very well and others not as well. And so we kind of gravitate towards things that do well.
I wonder if there's another question on that chat.
Also, Calscape includes plant communities for most of the plants. Every once in a while, something isn't known, and they won't do it for a cultivar. But they'll do it for the rest of the plants.
Right.
Because some plants will span plant communities. For instance, that yellow lupin. Actually, a bunch of them will span. The California aster will too. The toyon is in 4 different ones, as far as I know.
Yeah. Our toyon is just loaded with berries after 2 wet winters. There's thousands of berries. Can't wait for the cedar waxwings to show up. Well, Susan, another fantastic presentation, and some serious eye candy there.
Yeah, many thanks in the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
awesome. For you, for people that live in San Francisco, we'd love to see you at our live event on November 14th, and we will be giving away some local native wildflower seeds at that event, and we've got another wonderful speaker, and it'll be a good time. We're gonna be giving away chocolate and all kinds of tasty things. So please,
Ooh, one more
and
thing. California Bay Laurel candy available now from a Berkeley candy company called Laurelet. It's one of the things I don't have on my edible native plant buffet, but I need to because it needs some processing. And so someone else did the processing and the candy's available at Rainbow Grocery. I bought a lot today, but there are still a few left.
right on. Well, thanks for being here, everybody,
Thank
and
you.
hope to see you again real soon. Adios.
Night.